Welcome to another thrilling episode of Explorers of the Lost Vaults, the podcast where we embark on a captivating journey through history, delving into the remarkable artifacts hidden within museums around the globe. Sponsored by Bible Interact. With your host, Dr. George Sparks, who will guide you through tales of discovery, mystery, and wonder. Together, we'll explore the enigmatic realms of museums, revealing the secrets and histories contained within their walls. What treasures lie hidden? What stories do these artifacts have to tell? Buckle up, because this journey is sure to be an exhilarating ride. Now let's dive into the adventure and unlock the mysteries of today's episode.
I'm at a location right now for the Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History, and this is what we promised, the museum vault. And this is one particular vault that we're going to go into at this time. My name is Dr. George Sparks, and I'm with the CEO of the museum, Mr. Mancini. And as you can see, the museum has the safe with artifacts in it. We're going to take a look. We're not going to go into detail. That's for later on this year. John, if you can just wave to everybody. There we go. And he's going to open up the safe, and we're going to take a look at the treasures inside. And this is before we get to it this year, but this is what's coming up. This is what me and Dr. Graves have promised. Here we go. All right, and we are in the vault. Now look at this. So we are in a museum vault, seeing some very extremely rare items that the public has not seen at all yet. Okay.
We're going to do a new series that we promised, and it's going to be Explorers of the Lost Vault. That's right, Explorers of the Lost Vault. I went into a museum vault about a week ago with a gentleman named John Mancini, the CEO of the Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History. And in this small podcast that Dr. Graves has edited, we're going to see a number of different vessels, but namely just two. And the first one that you're going to see is a very small child's ossuary that dates to the 1st century BC and CE. And of course, this is from the Jewish traditional custom of burials. So they let the body decompose, and then they put the bones into these small boxes. It's so small, it is for a child. So it's a child's ossuary, meaning a bone box. Behind that ossuary, oddly enough, is a Hellenistic hydra. It kind of looks like a fire hydrant. We think of hydraulics, and it's got a I think a flower motif on it. It dates to around the 3rd to 2nd century BC. So you're looking at an item very much intact. That is around 2,300 years old. Then we're quickly going to look at a crater of a Mycenaean style. That's the ancient Greek style. And it came to the coast of, I'll say, the land of Canaan at that time. So we call it the Levant. And this was brought by a group of people that we know as the Philistines. It does have a designation to this type of pottery. I think it was dubbed once by Larry Steger from Harvard University, now deceased, Dr. Larry Steger, and also Dr. Trudy Doughton. Once again, both of them are now deceased. But anyway, it's called Mycenaean 3C1B, a type of Mycenaean ancient Greek pottery that arrives on the coastline. But it doesn't have the indigenous clay of that Greek culture. It has the clay of Canaan. It's different. It's more coarse, and the pottery style, of course, is Greek. So we know that has arrived from a culture that is now inhabiting the land of Canaan, just as the biblical narrative suggests. What's interesting about this piece of pottery, according to Larry Steger, was the Philistines only made this for possibly 50 to 60 years, and then it goes into a bichrome style that is very, very popular. So you're looking at an extremely rare vessel, and oddly enough, it's intact. So what an opportunity to share that with you, and now to explain exactly what you're seeing.
And this is going to happen, so stay tuned.
All right, good morning, folks. This is Biblical Archaeology for the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. My special guest today is Dr. David Graves. Received his PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. And we got some interesting things that are going to be mentioned in this podcast. Number one, the topic, Nebuchadnezzar II. It's going to be very, very interesting. He is the king of Babylon that is mentioned, very popular in the biblical narrative. Today, we have Dr. Graves, and he is going to tell us about Nebuchadnezzar II. Are we going to be with these other three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
Well, I used to have bedtime story I used to tell my children. It was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I like that.
So, no, we're going to be talking about them today. We are going to sort of do an introduction of who he was and his background.
Okay.
Today we're going to be talking about Nebuchadnezzar II, and I've entitled it From Glory to Grass. Used AI to give us a couple of pictures here of Nebuchadnezzar and all of his glory standing there as the emperor, and then picture of him disheveled and eating grass. So we'll find out what that means in a few moments, but anybody that knows the Bible will realize what I'm talking about there. Nebuchadnezzar is mentioned on these mud bricks. We know he's a Babylonian king. Well recognized. There are many of these. The one on the far right is at the Royal Ontario Museum. I took that photo in the ROM in Canada a few years ago. I deal with the material in my book on the archaeology of biblical people, and then I usually mention these coloring books, 3 of them that you can get now on Amazon, and fun to teach the children archaeology, along with mom and dad learning about it as well. So we're going to be talking about Nebuchadnezzar II today, and this is sort of a mini-series of the 7 Babylonian names that are mentioned in the Bible. Not all of them are kings, because we have 3 officials of Nebuchadnezzar mentioned here as well in the Bible, and they're all mentioned in Jeremiah 39, which is kind of interesting. That's how accurate the scriptures really are. We find their precise names mentioned outside of scripture as well as in the book of Jeremiah. And then we're going to look at evil Merodach, and then Belshazzar, the son and co-regent of Nabonidus. So today, Nebuchadnezzar, we already looked at Nabopolassar, and Merodach Baladan II, 2 earlier ones. So this is the son of Nabopolassar we looked at last week, and here is the list of the kings. After Nabopolassar, we have Nebuchadnezzar. It puts everything into perspective. Here we have Nabonidus' cylinder, Babylon, fall of Babylon with the Cyrus cylinder, and earlier we have the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. This is just about the same time as Nebuchadnezzar II, and we also have the Babylonian rations tablet, and then Nebuchadnezzar's brick. Well, there's the one that is from the British Museum with his name on it on the far right that just popped up there on our screen. So Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. 3 times he attacked Judah in the south. The first time was in 605 BC, and by that time the northern kingdom of Israel had already spent a little over 100 years in captivity. So they're already in captivity, and Nebuchadnezzar goes down to do some more fighting against them in 605 BC. Having been conquered and taken by the Assyrians now the Babylonians begin to inflict some pain on them. Here's the illustration from Hutchins's History of the Nations in 1915, the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC, and what that may have looked like. So 605 rises to power, becomes the king of Babylon both that year after defeating the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish, and establishes the Babylonians as the dominant power in the Near East at this period. Now, this particular Nebuchadnezzar brick was discovered by Robert Caldwell, and it was discovered in 1900 and 1901 in Babylon. And it's now in the British Museum, one of them, and one of them's found in the Royal Ontario Museum. So they found a number of them. And the significance, of course, is that now we have the name of the Babylonian king named outside of the Bible. The second campaign that he takes and invades Judah is when Jehoiakim is the king of Judah, and he surrendered Jerusalem to him in 597 BC. And Judah was carried off in exile with many of the Jewish leaders. And the prophet Ezekiel and Daniel are among those taken into captivity at this particular time to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. That's the time period right there in the red from our timelines that we use. The third campaign is in 586 BC, and Jerusalem was completely destroyed. All of the people of the land were taken into captivity. And Jeremiah was present in Jerusalem when it was taken and finally destroyed. And Daniel served as the high-ranking government official under 4 dynasties of the Babylonian power. Daniel governed throughout the reign of Nebuchadnezzar from 604 to 562 BC, though there is no mention of Daniel in the reigns of Evil Merodach or Nerigilisar or Merodach in 555 BC. That is the time period in which Daniel reigned as an official in the Babylonian Empire. Daniel is again mentioned in conjunction with the reign of Nabonidus, 555 to 539 BC, and is mentioned in Daniel chapter 5. And Belshazzar governed the land of Babylon while his father Nabonidus was out of the country. We'll dive more into that in detail when we look at Belshazzar, because that's kind of significant. There's been some controversy between the biblical text and the ancient records on this, and the ancient records helps to, I think, solve some of the dilemma and the discrepancies that we find in Scripture. Now we're going to look at the Hanging Gardens, some of his architectural achievements under Nebuchadnezzar II. He was known for his monumental building projects, including the reconstruction of Babylon, enhancing its walls, and possibly the Hanging Gardens, though this particular structure hasn't been identified and its existence is debated by scholars. But here we have a picture here on the bottom left corner of what the Hanging Gardens of Nineveh look like. Ones of Babylon probably look similar. Hanging Gardens of Nineveh from the British Museum. These are the gardens down here, trees, so forth. Here's a recreation of what it probably could have looked like. Give everybody an idea in their minds of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar was famous for his pride and his boasting, as we find mentioned in the book of Daniel, chapter 4. He boasts about his achievements, attributing them solely to his own might and glory. And then God sends Daniel to interpret a dream where a tree representing Nebuchadnezzar is cut down, possibly from his Hanging Gardens, symbolizing his coming downfall to his pride and his arrogance. And then the biblical passage says, as per Daniel's prophecy, Nebuchadnezzar is struck with a form of madness where he lives like an animal eating grass for 7 times, interpreted by some scholars as being 7 years. 7 times, 7 years, makes sense. It's probably that kind of a duration. This is described in Daniel chapter 4, verse 33, where he is driven away from people, and his body is drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew out like the feathers of an eagle, and his nails like the claws of a bird. So untrimmed nails, unkept hair, drenched in the dew of heaven. This is the AI's impression of what that might have looked like. You can see the nails there, that kind of a pictures what is envisioned in the book of Daniel. But again, this is AI, not factual, but it kind of gives everybody an image in their minds of what Daniel it was talking about, depicted in Daniel chapter 4, the divine punishment that came upon Nebuchadnezzar. But after this period, he's restored his sanity, and his kingdom are restored to him, leading to a profound acknowledgement by him of God's sovereignty and that God's in charge, not Nebuchadnezzar or the Babylonians. And Nebuchadnezzar then praises God, acknowledging his everlasting dominion and power. Sort of significant transformation of Nebuchadnezzar from glory to grass and back to glory again. So that's my tour of Nebuchadnezzar. George, do you have any comments?
Yeah, it's an interesting character in the biblical narrative, especially that end part where he goes out to the forest and turns into this wild creature.
Yes.
I did a little podcast years ago on that, and I said, this was sensationalism. I had to do it. And I'm guilty of sensationalism, folks. I admit it. And I don't care.
Who doesn't like some good clickbait?
Right. But this was kind of cute anyway, because I says, are werewolves mentioned in the Bible? Right.
Good lead in.
And I went by the definition of lycanthropy. And lycanthropy is the belief of people transforming in animals, right? And it had some, I think it became popular during the Greek period. So in Greek vases, maybe later on, of course, you can, when you're editing, you might be able to find a couple of Greek vases or dishes that have the transformation of lycanthropy. It had to do with, this is off the cuff, right? So I think one of the Greek deities like Zeus was insulted because a demigod mixed human blood in with his meal, and when he found out what was going on, he cursed him to everlasting, lycanthropy. So he would have to be changed into the beast that he was for doing such a vile act. That kind of sums it up kind of quickly, though. So anyway,
Well, we'll do a little bit of research, and we'll see if we can come up with a couple of examples for the audience to see what that looks like. So George and I'll put our heads together, and we'll do a little research and see if we can come up with some samples for you to give you a picture of what that looks like. So good point.
But I seen them in museums where it shows this act, according to Greek mythology. But anyway, let's go look at some real stuff that I know more about. And this is a little bit later on, because I just have my showcases right here to deal with, but it's pottery that is going to develop from, you could say, this Babylonian inspiration. And also the people do come back to Judah in a diaspora. I think it's the second diaspora. They do come back eventually.
Yeah.
After they're taken away. So by the time they come back, we have the end of the Persian period and then the Hellenistic period. So I have some late Persian Hellenistic pottery I could share with you for the moment. And this is a really cool intact spindle wool. Look at that. It's kind of like you can look at it. Look, it is beautiful, isn't it? It's intact. And it's kind of large. I've seen them, like, I'm going to say like this big, but this was so lovely that I had to have it for my own personal collection there. I put it up so everybody can see it. All right, I'm going to try to lay this down without breaking it. It kind of doesn't have much of a stand on it. Here's a very late Persian period crater. Look at the design on it. It's heavily faded. It's very pretty for a small crater. And
beautiful.
You can see where actually I fixed it. And I shouldn't have done that. I should have done it this way, because then it's perfect intact. I blew it. I showed everybody where I fixed it,
Well, George, you don't have to show your crack pot.
See, there is such a thing as lycanthropy.
Well, you know what?
I remember when I was in the hospital, because I remember when my mom asked me, she goes, "You know what lycanthropy is?" I said, "Well, when I was in the hospital, I had a kidney operation and I had a canopy under the bed, but But anyway, there it is. It's really cool.
George,
so you're thinking of something like, go ahead.
Paul uses an illustration when he talks about these pots that have cracks in them, and how you would find them to make sure that it was a good pot was they put a candle in it, and then they could see where the light shone through it. So he uses the illustration as the gospel is put into crack pots, so the light of Christ would shine through it. And that's actual illustration that the Apostle Paul uses of a pot with a crack in it. So
right.
it has a spiritual lesson for us.
That
Beautiful.
is cool. It's got a nice little design on it.
Brown and white? I can't quite tell.
You know, if I went like, I don't know if I can go like this. You shouldn't do this, folks. I might not be around next week because you can see a little bit better, maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's got a nice little design. It's heavily faded, and of course restored because I put the pieces back together. So let me get some of that. Okay, the spindle wool and a small crater.
And,
Share
George,
with everybody. Oh, let's see. And then this is a copy, a museum copy. This is going to be used later on. We get Dr. Finkel back on the program. And this is we talked about Babylon. This is the Babylonian map.
Yes.
Is it cool? It is really cool.
I showed a picture in our last podcast. I did a blow up of that in the podcast for everyone. So they can see the details on that.
Is this good? Is this camera doing a pretty good job though?
Yep, it is. Yep. I had blown up the one original one with really good detail on it in the previous podcast because you had held that up then as well. So yeah, looks great.
I already went on the internet and I looked up to see if there were illustrations where they actually used English and little points where there's the Euphrates River and there's Babylon, and it does mention a location that is in the biblical narrative by a different word. And I'll just give you a hint. You were on top of it.
Yes,
walking around Mount Ararat.
Ararat Range.
You were on Mount Ararat.
It's also understood as Arartu.
Oh, you just gave it away.
Right.
So anyway, let me think where it was at. It was kind of like in this broken chunk right here. Okay. And from what I understand from Dr. Finkel, there was a student that was assembling what we call diagnostic shards, except they were diagnostic pieces of cuneiform. Some are just so badly damaged that it doesn't matter. So they put those aside. And when they get a piece that is diagnostic, they lay it aside, and then Dr. Finkel would come in and look at it. Okay, with this lady who she was a student, but she was a student through ambition. It was her hobby. Cuneiform was her passion. And she laid this piece aside. It was broken off. It had that little triangle, if you can see these little triangles in there. And then Dr. Finkel came and said, well, I know where that goes. And he fitted it into the puzzle. And it gave an indication on which way to read it. Because once they got things in position, they can say, well, it looks like we got to read it from, was it clockwise or counterclockwise? And then, so anyway, they came up with a way to read it. And also the word showed up, Aratu, which you so nicely already gave away. So we have the Euphrates River, Babylon, and we'll also have the mountain range of Aratu, which in the biblical narrative is Mount Ararat.
Yeah.
Cool. But as we look at this, when we look at a map, sometimes it depends on how the diagram is. Usually there's a little key somewhere on the map that shows us how to read it. But this was actually written, all right, from a bird's eye view. So they're looking down. It's not like they're looking from the ground out at these items, right? We got satellites. We take this stuff for an advantage, right? We got planes and satellites, but back in this is
so they were
in their mind, that's how they're seeing this.
They were able to go up in a UFO and look down from a flying saucer and actually see it from the air. Okay,
we end this program now. And now a word from our sponsor.
George, on a serious note, what do you remember if it was reading it from left to right or right to left? Because of course you know that we read Hebrew, the Semitic languages, from right to left.
Yeah.
Wondering if that held true with the same way that they looked at the. Anyway,
I listened to the lecture, and he did mention that Dr. Irving Finkel from the British Museum did mention which way to read it. But I got a 50-50 chance of getting it right.
Well, there you
Either
go. Yeah.
clockwise or counterclockwise.
Well,
I
there's a
got a
lesson
coin
for
here.
our audience out there. Perhaps they
Flip
can
the coin up in the air. This is how we do cuneiform.
yeah.
Heads is clockwise, tails is counterclockwise, and it's head, so it's clockwise. There we go. That's our answer, and that's how we do science.
Yeah, my specialty is Greco-Roman, not cuneiform, so I'm out of my element there. But it was just kind of a curious thought that came to me as to whether that held true with the way that they would read their language, as to where they would also draw their map. But anyway,
that's
perhaps
interesting.
Israel Finkel, we have him on again at some point in the future,
Absolutely.
may actually answer that question for us. So it'd be good to know.
Well, you're absolutely right, because I got a couple more. Let's see, we had him on there for the first ghost. That's one of his books. And then he's got the Ark Before Noah. That should be coming up next. And then he has another book, I believe, written about the cuneiform tablet, on how they discovered it and pieced it together, and how it's very unique in what the Babylonians believed was a map of their world.
Yeah.
Now they got to imagine it from a bird's eye view. That's what's interesting. They're looking at it from an imagination of what they believe the world to look like from a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
So Mount Ararat was somewhere yonder.
Well, great. That's good, George,
go there.
to get his perspective on it, because, of course, folks may not realize, but Israel Finkel is one of the world's leading experts in cuneiform and works at the British Museum, and it's a real privilege to have him on as a guest. And perhaps we'll have him on again in the future and talk about some of these other discoveries. So really significant.
Well, you see, that's why I actually purchased, or biblical archaeology purchased, this little model, so that we could have him on the program. And then I have one right here. I'm sure he's got one too, but.
And we're bringing some high quality guests to our program, and reason why our audience should continue to tune in and watch our channel. You're always going to learn something, even though we have a lot of fun on it.
Absolutely. We get a little bit off the subject, but we have fun bringing in pottery, explaining it, going into the vault. I know we took a side trip on that too, but that's all fun. I think today we're around 177,000 subscribers, and we definitely want to do justice for all that. All those people subscribing, we want to be able to actually bring them good quality material, and we're working hard on that. Believe it.
Yeah, you'll see things here you won't see anywhere else.
That's true. That's we're going to do our best.
George and I know, I'm not talking about, we're the old artifacts, but no, we'll bring you some unique artifacts that you won't find anywhere else. Always good to chime in each week and give our 2 cents worth, expose the audience to new things that are happening all the time.
Right. And
George, I see that
cool
the sarcophagus this morning is open. Did the mummy?
I had my son dressed up as a mummy because I was doing an advertisement, and that's right, the advertisement's going to come out. Okay, folks, you want to kind of plug into this. It's going to be a Bible Interact, but it's going to be, you did the slide for this, David. Yes. The boy that found King Tut's tomb. Now, of course, we know that Lord Carnarvon was a rich benefactor that subsidized the excavation of Howard Carter in locating the tomb of King Tut. And he actually searched for King Tut's tomb in the Valley of the King, and he used a grid diagram over the Valley of the King, so little squares. And once he got done with this segment, then he went to the next. So he systematically checked them off. He was down to one last square, and they're thinking like, well, maybe we were wrong. Maybe King Tut's tomb, maybe he wasn't even buried here. He's just a boy king. Maybe they just didn't bury him. But what happened was, and this will be in this little 46-second advertisement, folks, and it's going to be really fun. A young boy was placing, I got one right behind me right here. See the amphora? So there's my son. He's in his mummy outfit. And there's the amphora, because the young boy was placing an amphora in the sand so it stands upright. right? And this is where the workers would dip the amphora and get water. I should go like this, right? And get water, and while they're working in the hot sun. So twice a day, he would bring more amphoras full of water to that excavation site. Well, when he was removing the sand, he found the top step because it was cut at a 90-degree angle, right? It went like this, right? A 90-degree angle, a step. And that doesn't happen in nature. So anyway, they went and got Howard Carter, the excavator, and that was the beginning of the stairway that went down to the discovery of all the gold, all the treasure, King Tut's tomb. How cool is that? And accidentally found by a young boy. But there's been a lot of major artifacts found by kids. And we talked about, yeah, we did. And it was a small advertisement. And it was on the little silver scroll found at Catophinon.
Yes.
It's a 7th, 6th century series of tombs below, I believe it is, what's the name of that church? St. Andrew's Church.
Yes.
And it's I believe southeast of Jerusalem. And that boy accidentally broke into an area of a tomb where they located that little silver amulet, unrolled it, and it had the priestly benediction on it. The Lord bless thee and keep thee and make his face shine upon thee and give thee peace. And it's the oldest known evidence of a scripture outside of the Bible. A little kid found it. Also, what's the other one that we did? It was an advertisement on that. And we did it was the Salome inscription found by kids playing hooky from school. I'm not saying kids should play hooky, but they were going through this water tunnel from the Gihon Spring to the Salome Pool. Somewhere in between that, they bumped into this inscription, and they went out and told people, like, hey, I think we found something. And of course, some ambitious looter went and hacked it off the wall, and now it's in the museum in Turkey at Istanbul.
And another one, George.
What's that?
And there's another one that needs to be mentioned. The most important discovery in the 20th century were found by two shepherd boys.
You're talking about my lost toupee that blew away in the breeze that day, and these two kids found my toupee. That was really nice of them. Go ahead, David.
This was the Tamara family, two Bedouin boys, Muhammad. I forget the other guy's name. I'll put it up on screen for everyone. I had the privilege of actually working with Joseph Tamara, one of the relatives, when I dug the Qumran 53 cave a few years ago. But there was two young boys that were out with their sheep, and their goats got into a cave, and they threw a rock in to chase the goats out, and they heard the shattering of pottery, and it ended up being the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Isn't that so cool, folks? And it's just living your life. You probably didn't even know who you're going to meet at an excavation, and something really wonderful happens. Isn't that so cool? And you want to know something? I have something right here, right now. And I'll say allegedly because there's no way, because it's not documented. But it was used as a lid of an amphora. Did I show you this? I think I did. Maybe I did, but maybe I did. I don't know. I'm getting old. No, I'm not. I just get forgetful. I'm not old. I'm just forgetful. And anyway, and this is scholars' suggestion. Scholars saying, well, maybe this is what happened. Is that when they were hiding the scrolls in the caves, it was done in such haste that they forgot to bring their oil lamps. So they took a small lid because it was a small amphora, and took the lid, turned it over, filled it with olive oil, and used it for a lamp as they placed these amphoras full of scrolls in these caves, which now we know are, of course, the Dead Sea Scroll caves. And well, here it is right here. I just happen to have it, which you're right, David. I don't want to hear it. I should be wearing gloves, white gloves, because I don't want, and he's going to get on my case. But look very carefully at the pottery, and you'll see the burn marks where they put wicks. Of course, the wick would probably burn out. They get another wick and they'd place it in there, and see all the burn marks? They use this lid. All right. As a lamp. Yes, sir.
What I would like the audience to do right now is to go and search on Google for the museum where the Dead Sea Scrolls are kept, the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem where the Dead Sea Scrolls are kept, and look at the design of the museum. If you flip that over, you're going to have the design of the museum. It has a little bit of a more of a top to it, but it's actually the top of one of the Dead Sea Scroll amphoras and jars that were used to store the Dead Sea Scrolls in. But you're right, they could also be used as an oil lamp if you flip them over, and people used various artifacts for different purposes. So good point.
So we'll say right. So we'll say plausibly today, if you tuned in and you're at this podcast, you've just seen a number of artifacts. And if I had all these artifacts on the table, right? The Babylonian map and the spindle wool and the little crater. And then I had that little lid. I bet you everybody would pass by that lid and say, oh, check out the crater. What about this cuneiform? What about that? And the most important piece to me, if it was laying on the table, all these on it would be that lid. Because I'll say the plausibility that, according to the museum, if it did come from the Dead Sea Scrolls, it makes sense. It does make sense. Now, I'm not the one that came up with this theory. All right. And if it came from the Dead Sea Scroll cave and it was used as a lamp when these items were being placed, that's so, because in such haste, it makes so much sense. It's so human, right? And to see it or to hold it and say at one time, this was in the vicinity of all this history, And right now it's right over here. I think that's pretty cool. And it's my privilege to share this with everybody, and just sometimes to show something that seems so small, so insignificant, but yet it has a lot behind it. And it becomes very, very valuable because of where it was, not what it is. It's a piece of a lid of something, an amphora, and I'm sure there's thousands. What makes it so unique, right? But
Great.
Is our program getting too long?
Well, we're probably getting to the extent of it. I don't know how long it's been running right now, to be honest. So
we can edit, and where it does this. Oh, I got one more thing because I pulled this out of the vase, the vault too, because I do these little ads. I don't know if you can see that, but this is that. You got a picture of this. I sent you a picture of the obverse and reverse. So I'm showing people the reverse, and you can at least see there's something on this coin.
Good.
And so but you can splice something in, because you know what it is. It's that Persian coin from the 4th century. And according to Mr. David Hendon, who's a numismatic, nice name for a person that knows a lot about coins, and he's an expert in biblical coins. I think his book on biblical coins is now at the 6th edition, maybe more. And he believes this possibly what we're looking at is the oldest, you could say, interpretation of the walls of Jerusalem. Now, since it's 4th century, we're looking at the walls of Jerusalem that were repaired by Ezra and Nehemiah.
Yes.
How cool is that? And here's just a little coin. You see the front of it is Baal sitting on a throne. So Baal and throne. It's of course a pagan deity. But on the reverse, okay, so then you have the walls of Jerusalem. And it also has in Aramaic, beyond the river. So it means what's beyond the Euphrates River. What's so important? Well, the Jews, remember, they went back home according to the edict of Cyrus, and in the biblical narrative of Ezra and Nehemiah, they instituted the rebuilding of Solomon's temple. And it says the people cried because even though they tried to rebuild it, it wasn't near as glamorous as what they once remembered. And then they had to rebuild the walls. Mm-hmm. And according to Dr. David Hendon, I'm going to say suggested. I'm not going to say he said this is. He suggested that might be what we're looking at. How cool is that? So we just seen on this program a jar lid, very cool, and also a coin, possibly illustrating the walls of Jerusalem after the rebuild of the time of Israel and Nehemiah, because I think they're 5th century and the coin is 4th century, somewhere around there. But that's my story, David, and I'm stuck with it.
Great. Well, great podcast today, George, as always. We talked a little bit about Nebuchadnezzar's from glory to grass and back to glory again, and the significance of the Babylonian captivity. And you presented a few artifacts that relate to that. One thrown in there, I guess, on Mount Ararat, Ararat.
Well, it's Babylonian map.
That's true. It is a Babylonian map, so it all relates to the Babylonians. And so good job, and hopefully our audience got a little bit of information and something they didn't know before out of it today. And we'll keep on doing it for our folks that keep chiming in.
Absolutely. Hey, and this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. And also we're going to have the Explorers of the Lost Vault. That's coming up. So those are a number of different titles to plug in and remember. Until next week, David, you have a good time. Thanks for all that you're doing, your editing and research and your PowerPoints. And everybody else, thanks for tuning into us. And also all the subscribers, 177,000 subscribers so far. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And it's all because of your participation. Until next week, my name is Dr. George Sparks, and thank you very much, and have a good day.